For decades, Sharon Stone was the face of power and mystery in Hollywood. But behind the headlines, the red carpets, and the unforgettable roles, she was quietly building a life as a mother to three sons. Each one entered her world not by accident, but by choice, adopted at pivotal moments in her life, each child marking a new chapter in her transformation from global sex symbol to something far more enduring. A fiercely protective, battle-tested woman raising a family on her own terms. This is the story of what happened to Sharon Stone's kids and how her oldest son, Roan Joseph Bronstein Stone, became the anchor through her most brutal storms. Roan was born in 2000, the same year the Muse earned Sharon her Golden Globe nomination, and the same season her marriage to newspaper editor Phil Bronstein was starting to fracture. Adopted as a newborn by the couple, Roan was introduced to the world not in a quiet nursery, but in the glare of paparazzi and premieres. From the very beginning, his name was printed beside one of the most polarizing actresses in America. But beneath the flashbulbs, Sharon was already shifting. Her days of trading on the seduction of basic instinct were behind her. She was approaching motherhood with the same intensity that once made her the most feared woman in a courtroom thriller. She changed diapers between studio notes. She took calls about rewrites while bottle feeding. And in every interview, she made one thing clear. Roan wasn't just her son, he was her salvation. But salvation doesn't guarantee peace. By 2001, just a year after Roan's adoption, Sharon Stone suffered a devastating stroke and cerebral hemorrhage that nearly killed her. It took her years to relearn how to walk, speak, and remember lines. And in those long, humiliating years of recovery, the industry that once adored her quietly moved on. Roles dried up, friends disappeared, offers stopped coming, and in the middle of it all, a marriage cracked beyond repair. In 2003, Sharon and Phil filed for divorce. What followed was one of the most painful custody battles in celebrity memory, not because of its length, but because of the weaponization of Sharon's career against her. In court, her infamous Basic Instinct scene was cited as evidence of poor moral character. One judge even asked young Roan if he knew his mother had made sex movies. Sharon later admitted that question nearly broke her. "I lost custody because people saw me as that character," she would say years later, "not as a mother." In 2004, the court awarded full custody to Phil Bronstein. Sharon was relegated to visitation, a brutal blow to a woman already recovering from physical collapse. And yet she never stopped showing up. Roan's childhood became a life lived in two worlds: the stability of his father's Northern California estate and the emotional gravity of his mother's Beverly Hills home. Publicly, he remained protected. No headlines, no red carpets. But insiders noticed the quiet bond that endured. Roan kept visiting his mother. He never rejected her, and as he entered his teenage years, it became clear that he had inherited more than her jawline. He had her resilience. While Sharon began adopting two more sons, Laird and Quinn, and rebuilding her life out of the spotlight, Roan stayed her constant. In 2019, he took a step that stunned even longtime fans. He filed to legally add Stone to his name, becoming Roan Joseph Bronstein Stone. The gesture was quiet but seismic, a full-circle claim of identity after years of legal and emotional distance. Even more surprising, Roan was now stepping into his own creative orbit. Despite being raised far from the Hollywood machine, Roan began expressing interest in the arts. In his early 20s, he surfaced on Sharon's Instagram not just as a beloved son, but as a budding artist, working as a glass sculptor, experimenting with form and fragility. One post showed him shirtless, covered in tattoos, proudly holding a handcrafted glass vessel. The caption read, "My artist." It was more than maternal pride, it was a passing of flame. By 2022, whispers in Hollywood suggested Roan had begun working on film sets, not as an actor, but possibly in writing and production. He remained intensely private, refusing interviews, never capitalizing on his last name, even as Sharon teased a collaboration in the works. "He's my heart," she told a friend, "and he's coming into his own." That independence didn't come without shadows. Sharon has spoken openly about how losing Roan in court nearly destroyed her, admitting that the heartbreak triggered heart rhythm issues and emotional trauma she's still navigating. It's a kind of grief, she said. You feel it even when they're still alive. But Roan, now in his mid-20s, seems to carry that shared pain as part of his creative fuel. He doesn't post, he doesn't pose, but when he appears, a rare red carpet, a museum show, it's with quiet confidence. Today, Roan Joseph Bronstein Stone stands not in his mother's shadow, but in her light. Not because he chased her fame, but because he inherited her fight. He was the boy the industry once said she wasn't fit to raise. He became the man who honored her with his name. And while the world remembers Sharon Stone for a look, a role, or a scandal, Roan remembers her for something else entirely: surviving and never ever leaving him behind. If Roan was the son born into fire, caught in the public collapse of Sharon Stone's health, marriage, and stardom, then Laird Vonne Stone arrived during the quiet aftershock, when the world had stopped looking, but Sharon hadn't stopped fighting. Adopted in 2005, just 1 year after she lost full custody of Roan, Laird came into her life as both a second chance and a statement. He was the first child she would raise entirely on her own, without the shadow of a courtroom or a co-parent. And unlike Roan, whose adoption had made headlines, Laird's arrival barely registered in the press. That wasn't an accident. By this point, Sharon was no longer interested in celebrity approval. She had survived a near-fatal brain hemorrhage, watched the industry discard her, and endured the humiliation of having her parenting questioned on the world stage. What she wanted now was control over her life, her family, and her identity as a mother. Naming her new son Laird Vonne was the first clue. The middle name wasn't random, it was Sharon's own. This child wasn't just family, he was a reflection of her, reborn. Laird grew up in a house without movie premieres, but filled with recovery. Her framed movie posters, the strangers whispering in supermarkets, the way adults lowered their voices when they said her name. It was all there, humming beneath the surface. And like many children of fallen icons, Laird developed a cautious awareness of fame, curious, but not eager to participate. As he entered his teens, that instinct only deepened. Laird showed little interest in following his mother into film or entertainment. Instead, he focused on academics and athletics, thriving in environments where last names didn't carry weight. Still, Sharon couldn't help but beam with pride, or post it. Over the years, her Instagram became a modest window into their bond. Birthday photos, graduation glimpses, and the occasional holiday selfie revealed a boy with a wide smile and a quietly observant demeanor. He wasn't flashy. He didn't seek the lens. But he carried a quiet confidence, the kind shaped not by adoration, but by endurance. The public got a rare, powerful glimpse in 2024 when Sharon posted photos from Laird's high school graduation. Dressed in cap and gown, he stood beside her with the posture of someone ready to step beyond her orbit, grateful but grounded. And then came the caption, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it." To outsiders, it was a sweet milestone. But to those who knew the backstory, the battles she fought to raise her sons alone, the silence she endured while being dismissed as difficult or unstable, it was something far more profound. It was a victory. There were whispers too, quiet ones, about what Laird might do next. Some suggested a future in design. Others pointed to his interest in tech. But whatever path he chose, one thing seemed certain. He was carving it on his own terms. And if his last name opened any doors, he made sure his work was what kept them open. Still, the weight of Sharon's past never fully disappeared. In interviews, she's spoken about how being a single mother in Hollywood meant being underestimated twice, once as a woman and again as a mother. She recalled being told she was too emotional, too dramatic, not stable enough to raise boys. And then she glanced at Laird, bright, healthy, respectful, and know the truth had already spoken for itself. Today, Laird Vonne Stone lives far from the headlines that once consumed his mother. He's part of a generation that values discretion over recognition, substance over noise, and in many ways that makes him the most radical legacy Sharon could have left. A young man defined not by her scandals, but by her survival. He was the child she named after herself, not as an act of ego, but as a declaration of continuity. That no matter how hard the world tried to erase her, she would keep showing up, smarter, stronger, and raising sons who didn't just know her story, but carried it forward. If Laird was the quiet continuity of Sharon Stone's fight, then Quinn Stone was her exclamation point, the child she adopted in 2006, when she no longer needed to prove herself to anyone, but still chose to build something lasting. By the time Quinn arrived, Sharon was already parenting two boys alone. Her stardom cooled, her name no longer flashing on marquees but echoing in retrospectives and film school celebd. And yet, this third adoption didn't come from a place of retreat. It came from resolve. Quinn was not a rebound or an afterthought. He was the final stroke in a portrait of motherhood that Sharon had spent the last decade quietly redrawing. "I built this family," she once said, "brick by brick." With Quinn, she laid the final cornerstone. From infancy, Quinn was enveloped in the rhythm of a household built on resilience. Sharon, now in her late 40s, had traded roles in studio blockbusters for more personal projects. Films about trauma, recovery, and spiritual renewal. Those themes weren't just artistic, they were lived. At home, she was no longer the high-voltage starlet fighting for custody or clinging to relevance. She was a woman fully grounded, hosting dinner parties for friends, organizing playdates for three boys, and guiding Quinn through a world where family didn't look traditional, but felt entirely whole. Unlike Roan, who once straddled two homes, or Laird, who arrived during the quiet rebuild, Quinn was born into stability, and with that, a different kind of pressure. He would grow up with no memory of the Sharon Stone who shocked censors or battled studios. His mother to him was simply mom, but the world outside their home never forgot. As Quinn grew, so did the quiet tension between privacy and legacy. By his early teens, it was clear he had inherited Sharon's sharp mind and dry humor, but also her instinct to protect. He rarely appeared in public and almost never gave interviews or participated in media outside his mother's carefully curated glimpses. Still, there were moments, subtle, easily missed, that hinted at a more complex emotional world. In one interview, Sharon described a late-night conversation with one of her sons, widely believed to be Quinn, about identity and self-understanding. The exchange wasn't dramatic, it wasn't performative, but it was, as she put it, the most honest conversation I've ever had in my life. Sharon never elaborated. She didn't need to. The moment spoke volumes about the kind of home she had built, one where expression was safe, and silence wasn't a shield, but a space to grow. While Quinn's older brothers leaned toward the creative arts, Roan dabbling in glass sculpture and storytelling, Laird reportedly interested in design, Quinn's path has remained largely out of view. Some speculate he may pursue psychology. Others whisper about quiet work in humanitarian spaces, drawing from Sharon's own advocacy in AIDS research and trauma healing. But those are only guesses. The truth is, Quinn has become something increasingly rare in Hollywood families, a total mystery by choice. And in a way, that silence is its own kind of legacy. In recent years, as Sharon returned to red carpets for honors and retrospectives, she made a point to credit her children not just as her motivation, but her grounding. "I would have died if I didn't have them," she said bluntly in one interview. And when asked which part of her life she was most proud of, the films, the fame, the comeback, she didn't hesitate, being their mother. That answer isn't just emotional, it's political. Sharon Stone, once painted as too wild to mother, too controversial to trust, too unstable to parent alone, is now the matriarch of three thoughtful, grounded young men. And Quinn, quiet and observant, carried her spirit, not as performance, but as principle. If you found this breakdown powerful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood's forgotten children, subscribe to our channel. Your support brings these invisible stories to light. Thanks for listening.